Hey guys, Zomfox here. Now, for those of you that don't know, we are currently in a Pokemon boom. Now, this boom started back with TCG Pocket as well as Surging Sparks being the real catalyst of this last year. Now, while at this exact moment we are in a bit of a correction period, we haven't actually crashed yet. But a crash is almost inevitable based on the history of Pokemon cards, as the last two instances of true booms happening were followed by subsequent crashes. And so in this video, we're going to be looking at what happened after the last boom, i.e. the last Pokemon crash. And this was the pandemic boom and the pandemic crash, where when the pandemic happened, a bunch of people were stuck at home, well, pretty much everybody, and a lot of them got back into old hobbies or found new ones, and Pokemon cards were one of them. Logan Paul hype train, a lot of other hype trains, modern and vintage cards, especially true vintage and ultra modern at that point being Sword and Shield, all spiked to really insane amounts. And a lot of these chase cards tanked in value and have never recovered. Some of them went down in value steadily but surely going down and then eventually went back up. And some of them just kept going up. And so these cards can be a very, very good parallel to the current cards we have right now. As against what a lot of people would try and make you believe, spoiler alert, the Van Gogh Pikachu, the 151 Charizard, the Paldean Fates Charizard, the Bubble Mew, the Greninja, the Sunbreon, not all of these cards are going to continuously just go up in PSA 10 value over the course of the next 5 years. Some of these cards are going to fall at least 50%, upwards of 80%, and some of them are going to go up by 300%. It's just how it works when this next crash happens. So we're going to be looking at 15, yes, 15 different examples of PSA 10 chase cards from the pandemic era and a little bit after, because Sword and Shield's era ended a bit after the real boom happened. So looking at 15 overall examples of cards and seeing what happened after the last boom. Now we're going to be using PSA's auction price tool on their website to do this video looking at the price history of these cards. It is a free resource. You do not even have to have a PSA account to use this. For cards that have sales relatively frequently, this is a great resource. As well, it doesn't get every single sale. Newsflash, most of these platforms don't get every single sale, but this one, especially for these cards, like most ones we're talking about today, having multiple sales within, a week or two, it's a very consistent way to look at the overall value of cards, and it allows us to see the overall population and overall gem rates of these cards as well. So we're going to be starting with the Vivid Voltage Chonkachu Rainbow, the Pikachu VMAX. This was the chase card. If you were around during this era, you know that this card was unfathomably desired. I mean, seriously, people talk about cards like the 151 Zard or the Sunbreon being super desired. Those were like nothing compared to this one. This is the one everybody wanted to pull. It's the biggest reason why Vivid Voltage ended up getting such a big, massive reprint, to where it would take literally 5 years for the boxes to really start moving back up. But for a while, this was the card you wanted. Now, when it comes to this card in terms of overall grading and stuff like that, this is a card that had a relatively solid gem rate. You had about 10,800 roughly, technically it's less obviously, get a PSA 10, you had about 4,800 nines, and you had a bit more than 1,000 in 8s or 7s, and you had lesser ones, to the point where it was over a 50% gem rate. But as for this card's value, this is where you will see just how insane it was. This was a card that initially out of the gates was about a $900 card back in late November 2020. Then during early 2021, where the boom really reached its peak, it was up to like $1,600, $1,700, $1,800. Yes, you had sales of $2,100 and obviously the insane $2,500. But if we're being completely honest, this was pretty much an $1,800 card. The average of this area was about $1,800. Then it went down, but it still was solid. It was still about a $1,300 to $1,400 card during this time. Then, heading into March, it went down again to about $1,000, went down to about $800 after May. Then it went down to $700 again in September. It kept going down until eventually 2022. It was about a $500 to $600 card. And then it went down, and just look at this. It just kept going down, 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 to where for pretty much almost an entire year, in fact, it was over a year, it was a sub $200 card. I mean, it's insane. Now, it did start going back up again. We talk about the boom. The boom started about a year ago when Surging Sparks came out, and then TCG Pocket came out. Card boomed a little bit, went up to about $350. Then it went down again, and now it's recently spiked to about $400. This card is down, as the thumbnail showed, about like 80%. It is insanely down. It is just wild to look how far down this card has fallen. This was, again, the chase card for so many people at this time. And while people who are truly new and are considered novices to the hobby might not realize this, rainbows were desired. There was a point in time where they were the cards people wanted to get. The Sun and Moon era. The Sun and Moon Charizard was a classic. Everybody wanted that card. And again, this Rainbow Pikachu was the card people wanted. And while full art trainers, the actual full arts were more desired than the rainbows, when it came to the Pokemon, it was the rainbows that people wanted. They were just so much rare. As quick little fun fact, pretty much every card, not all of them, mainly the full arts, but all of the chase cards that were somewhat rare that are rainbows, alt arts, they're pretty much as rare, if not rarer, than the current chase cards in a pure pulling that specific card, which is how a lot of people judge the pull rates. Let's say, yes, an alt art is one in every, let's just say for the sake of argument, 50 or 100 packs, but there's 10 alt arts, it's really one in 500 or 1,000. That number, which is what most people care about, these cards pretty much match it. Like, this was about like a 1 in 1,000 pack pull, I believe. But again, this card was the chase card, and it tanked in value, and it's 200. And remember, this isn't even that insane of a pop count compared to modern cards or the new ultra modern cards. Just an FYI. But again, it shows demand versus supply, right? People talk about pop counts don't matter, or pop counts don't matter because, it's about how much people want them. This card was wanted. Just because something is desired today does not mean it is going to be desired tomorrow. Look at the cards that got pumped up. Look at other cards that a lot of people really don't like. The 151 Zard is a very controversial card. So is the Van Gogh Pikachu. A lot of people who have been in the hobby know that Van Gogh Pikachu is not as good as the Munch Scream promos. Number one, there are multiple Van Gogh self-portraits. It's not of a truly iconic singular painting like the Scream one is. The Scream ones are all rare combined than just the Van Gogh. So just because it is desired today does not mean it will be tomorrow. That is why we're looking at this stuff here. But again, we will see some examples of cards that have continued to be desirable to the point where they have never gone down even during correction periods. Now we have the full art, or they consider it a full, but the Charizard VMAX from Darkness Ablaze. Yeah, this was such an easy chase card to pull. Because of what they did, for those of you who again are new, they pretty much put this card into multiple different ones. The VMAX was supposed to have a rainbow. They ended up putting the rainbow in Champion's Path, and they made a shiny version of this card for Shining Fates. And so this one only had this one VMAX. This is a regular VMAX. And it's not surprising to see that it has a very high amount of 10s, and actually a really solid gem rate. This Sword and Shield era had a really solid print quality compared to really eras before and after. Scarlet and Violet is, well, I don't think it's as bad as people claim it out to be. Like, this isn't X and Y levels of bad. It ain't as good as Sword and Shield. This card was a really solid gem rate. I mean, when you're looking at this, you've got less than 1,000 8s compared to the overall near 30,000 graded. That is an insanely good gem rate. This is a really solid one, over 66%. Now, as for the card's value, again, look at this graph. It's just going straight down almost. Right out the gate, it was a $600 card. But this is late 2020. Then it went down because, again, a lot of these were getting graded. They were coming out. It wasn't super rare. And then 2021 hit, and it spiked back up to about $600 once again. 600, then it went down again to about 300. Now, it actually hovered upwards to about 365 in April 2021, then went down rapidly to $200 in June of 2021. From there until May of 2022, or for the sake of making it easier, the next June, it went down to about 115. It went down almost $100 or 50%. Then it continued to go down up to 2024 to where this was like a $50 to $60 card in this time period of July 2024 in this whole area. Now, it did start to go back up again during this boom that we're in, because we are in a boom. As much as some people might say it's not a true boom, this is a boom. And it went up back to 100, 120, stayed consistent, and then it's boomed again very recently, because what's happened is, I think over the past 2 months, a lot of people have realized this ultra-modern stuff isn't as rare as people might think it is because of, the argument of supply and demand. It is objectively common compared to every other era in the past, with Sword and Shield being the lesser one, but a lot of people are now getting nostalgic for Sword and Shield. Again, the 5-year rule, if you know the 5-year rule, gaming, cards, whatever, pretty much after 5 years, the public opinion always goes and shifts from whatever it was for a while. So instead of this card being a card that was viewed as overhyped, overrated, because it was such a common card, now it's, going back up to 200. But even to where it is now, where it's gone down about 150, even at 150, this card is still tanked in value. I mean, it's about 25% of what it was. Massive, massive tank for that one. Now, here is the rainbow. Now, key thing to note, this is not as rare as other rainbows. Because it was in Champion's Path, it wasn't as tough of a pull, though it was still a relatively toughish gem rate. Not really. This is almost a 20k gem rate for 27,000. It's a little bit better actually than the previous one. So again, really solid gem rate card. So this card was relatively easy to gem, but again, when you're talking about these gem rate versus population, blah blah blah. As for this card, looking at the value, this is one of those that is definitely a not as insane, but still is a really solid one to look at. Now, if we cut this down to 5 years just to make the graph look a bit more consistent, this card came out, again, as you just saw a little earlier, but this card basically about a month after it existed was about $1,500 in a 10. Then it went down to about 1,000, and then it went down to about 700, then it went down to 800. Now, this card didn't really have a massive boom. Now, it did kind of rebound-ish, not really. It stayed basically about the same as 700. Then it went down to 500 in May. Then it continued to go down all the way to about 400, less than 400 in October of 2021. Then it had a little bit of a resurgence here in January 2022. Then it went down again to 300. And it is essentially it's basically stayed at 300. Yes, there have been times like over here-ish, I think it just passed, that has gone down to like 200. For all intents and purposes, this card has basically been 250 to 300 for like 2 years now. Yet this card used to be 1,500. I mean, that's a massive drop as well. That's another 80% dip right there. It's insane. And this is another example. This was a really big chase card. People wanted this thing, and it just kept going down. It was a chase card. It was the same as a lot of these current cards, but it went down. Now, looking at another one of the Charizards, we have the VMAX Shiny from Shining Fates. This one was like 1 in less than 300 packs to pull. Again, it was Shining Fates. Wasn't hard at all. You see that in the fact that the pop count, because number one, the set did get a decent amount of printing, and then number two, it was a relatively easy pull. So it has 40,000 pop. This one is very much like ultra modern cards, where it's just like insane numbers of cards being graded and printed. This is very in line with those, and this was a really big chase card. This was the most desirable of these three. 30,000 graded compared to 40,000 total. This was over a 75% gem rate, so this was really easy to get in a 10. As for the grade, yikes. Now, these were very beginning early sales. In terms of true actual sales, this was about a $1,300 card off rip, and then it fell to about $1,000 in April of 2021. So this was about $1,000 for almost 2 months. For almost 2 full months, it was about $1,000. Then, as you can see, it dipped. Dipped all the way to $700 in June. Once June hit, this card was hitting under $700. Then it just kept going down, 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 and then you had this other dip right around, early to mid 2022, where it ended up going all the way down to about $220 back in October that year. And then it pretty much stayed roughly the exact same. This is one of those cards where, and I will potentially talk about this like the Burger Chew in a future video, because I'm thinking about doing a video looking at like the highest total graded Pokemon cards. Certain cards, no matter their pop count, should be viewed as in a 10, they should be X to X amount of money. Like the Burger Chew, for instance, I believe that is a card that should almost always be a 75 to 150 card. It should never really go up. Like, it really never should go up above 150 in a 10, but it never should be like a $30 PSA 10. This is one of those cards I feel for 200. I feel like 200 for this card is a very solid one. This was a very desired chase card in this era, but for the era it's in, it is insanely common. So I actually think that this staying at $200 was a very solid price, both things. I think this was a bit cheap going to 150. And now it has spiked very recently, again, early September, to being about $400. Dipped a little bit to $350. And it's about, again, for all intents and purposes, about like a $300 to $350 card. But considering this card was really consistent at $1,000, that's about a 66% drop off in value. Though, like I said, this card at $200, I think this is one of those that really should be within $50 one way or the other. Even though I think less than, like, $150 I think is cheap. But $200 to $250 I think is where this card really should stay at for at least another like 10-ish years or 5 years. Don't want to go too crazy 10 years, but at least the next 5 years it should stay around that, but that's just my thoughts. Now, one more Charizard. I'm sorry, but just one more. The ETB promo from Champion's Fates, or Champion's Path, I mean. You got this, obviously, from the ETB. There wasn't no Poke Center ones. These are just the ETB promos. This card was relatively desired in a 10. Now, because this was an ETB promo, the overall gem rate is not the exact same of being the insanely high like the last ones were, but it was still over 50%. Again, 85,000 total graded, insanely common card because it was an ETB promo. Just goes to show how much of the set was printed. As for this one, again, almost 50,000 tens, almost 30,000 nines, and then it just dips after that, but still well over 50% gem rate. Now, as for the value of this card, now I did also do the 5-year ones for this one because if you do all time, you see a really big initial spike there. It just makes the graph look less consistent. So this is the overall real graph. Again, card came out against 350, but then it ended up holding pat at about 200-ish bucks. It would go down, it would go a little bit up. It was basically 150 to 200 for pretty much like almost basically half a year. Then it went down a bit, and it just kept going down to the point where it was like a $30 to $40 10, which might sound crazy, but again, this wasn't super desirable. Now, this one I would also say is like the Burger Chew should be like, this one probably more like 50 to 100, but again, it went up a little bit during 2023. It went down, went up. It's been hovering under 100, and it's been steadily rising. Again, this year, another thing that true veterans of the hobby have been talking about, I know, like I think Opossum has talked about this, people who have been in this hobby know that FOMO is real right now. Promos, yes, specific promos have always been very desired, but recently it's been like almost any promo in a 10 is just getting like insane value. This card's been going up over the past couple of months to the point now where it is like a consistent near $100 card. It's more like 80, but even at 80, this card is still fell over 50%. Not a massive dip, but considering how popular this card, how insanely printed this card was, again, a lot of these Ultra Modern cards are just like this. As much as people don't want to say it's the same thing, in a lot of ways, the Van Gogh Pikachu is similar to this one. Van Gogh Pikachu, not a super tough gem card. It's not as hard a gem rate card as I think some people might try to have you believe. It's insanely printed. Now, yes, one big difference. This is just a full art Charizard. The Van Gogh Pikachu is of a painting. As mentioned before, there is a significantly better, or technically 5 significantly better painting cards. But in terms of overall pop count and stuff, this kind of goes to show just how insane the Van Gogh Pikachu is right now. Though, like I said, that one is really different. This one is more in line with, I think, the Burger Chew. Like, pop count, it matches the Van Gogh relatively well, but in terms of the overall type of card, this really matches the Burger Chew card, where it's a very printed, super common card that still is desirable. So, yeah. Now that's out of the Pokemon from this early part. Well, these are the big chase cards from that early era of Sword and Shield, minus a couple of Snorlaxes, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, well, yeah, we're going to look at this one now. So this is the full art, or the Rainbow Snorlax from Sword and Shield. Now, for the Pokemon, this was the most desirable card from Sword and Shield's base set. Yes, there was the, the Zacian, and yes, there's the Marnie, which we'll talk about those later, but those are trainers. This is the Pokemon. Now, as for this Rainbow Rare, this card was not nearly as popular. That's why, it's got sub 5,000 total graded. But again, gem rate really solid, though, because of the fact that there's less graded, it's usually going to result in a higher gem rate. As for the value, this is still one that has gone down in value. Again, came out in June, then it went up during that pandemic that really hit us over here. Again, was like 130, then it went all the way up to being about a $300 card, with multiple sales being just under it and a couple that were pretty much at 300. Yes, there were some low sales. It was a $200 to $300 card. Then it went down a bit to about 170, 150, stood at 130 in February, went down all the way to a $60 card in 2022's December, and stayed that way through April of 2023, and even down all the way to sub 50 in this past year, 2024. Then it started rising again. It's actually been rising during this 2024 period all the way till now, to where it is back to being a $170 card. Now, is it at the peak? No, peak till now it is almost a 50% decrease. It's more like 40%, but still a decrease. But it's actually gone up. This is a very interesting graph. Went up, went down, and then went back up after being stagnant for a while. Again, a card can be desirable today, not desirable tomorrow. A card can also be not desirable today and become desirable tomorrow. When you're looking at people, right, this is one of those cards that kind of shows that if that saying is true that people are trying to say for the reason of this boom happening and why it's different than past booms, you'll hear the argument, oh, but you have a bunch of new people to the hobby. That means that cards like this one, even though this really doesn't show how common of a card this is, cards that are this rare in terms of pure pop count are cards that should be ones that move. Now let's look at the other big Snorlax, the gold Snorlax. I believe there might have been a bit of a period, I don't remember 100% sure, there might have been a bit of a period where this was the most valuable card from Chilling Reign. It was even more than the Blaziken. This is a card everybody really wanted at this point. And as for this one, this 5,300 compared to the 1,600. This kind of shows this was a tougher gem rate card than the last one, because again, the last one, when you look at it, is, well, not super, but yeah, never mind, it definitely is. This is a tougher gem card. Still not insane. It's still like a 66%, actually, a bit more than that. But in terms of the value, this is another one that's just gone down and really has not recovered. Now, it actually has been recovering. Again, this was down to like 100 to 125 in 2024 and late, and then it's gone up to being about $200 now. But this card used to be a $500 card, even though like this whole time area at the lowest sale was $288. So for all intents and purposes, this averaged to be like a $350 card for a lot of the 2021 when it came out, not counting the initial, first few sales. And again, even back here when it was, really finding its ground, it was a $200 card in late December. And it's only recently hit that again. If you had this card at all during like 2023 or 2024, you lost money if you bought this pretty much literally any time in 2021 or even early 2022. Again, not the most desirable card from this era, but this was a card a lot of people wanted. A lot of people wanted this one the most from Chilling Reign at the time, and the value just didn't fully hold. But again, it did have a bit of a rise recently. But let's look at some trainers. Full Art Marnie. Kind of wanted to say this one, but no, I'm going to talk about it now. Now, this was a big chase card. Again, the waifu craze was insane. Now, mainly hit Japanese, but English cards were affected to a degree. This card had 3,000 copies graded in a 10. You had 17 and a 9. Actually, a somewhat tough gem rate in this one being a 60%er, which compared to a lot of other ones we've talked about so far, relatively difficult. As for this card's value, again, very similar-ish to the Snorlax with another separate boom over here. Look at this one. Initially came out the gates at 125. But unlike the Snorlax where it went down, this one boomed up. Because again, 2021 was where we were at the peak of that pandemic boom for sports cards, comics, Pokemon cards. Went up to like 350. I mean, hell, there was a sale of 455 in 2021. But this card really was about a $300 card. I mean, this averaged in this time frame 300. Then it went down some more, and it ended up being about like 140 in 2023. It would go up again to 275, almost 300 back in 2023. Would go down all the way to being a sub $100 card. Hell, it was a sub $75 card. It was a sub $50 card in September of 2024. But after this little, when it hit down here, it started to gain some traction. Again, we're getting to that 5-year point. It's been over 5 years since Sword and Shield came out. Now, I personally have always thought that the rivals in Sword and Shield were very solid, especially compared to pretty much any game that has a trio of rivals outside of Black and White, because if you count N, it's pretty much unbeatable. But this trio was incredible and really was the inspiration to Scarlet and Violet, which a lot of people love. I personally think that this trio as a trio are better, though I think that the best of Scarlet and Violet are better than Sword and Shield, if you know what I mean. Like, overall, I think this trio from Sword and Shield is better, but in terms of the best characters from Scarlet and Violet, I think they're better. Mainly because Nimona, I think, is just a really weak character. I know, hot take, apparently. I don't know why it's a hot take. I think Nimona is like everything they hate Hop or How, except How is pretty bad, but that's another topic for another day for the gaming channel, or the gaming side of the channel. Again, call right up to 110. Yes, it's rebounded 100x or 100% from what it was in 2024. But it is still down significantly from what it was. Again, this is like a $350 card. Even if you call it 300, it's still down almost 60. It is down 60%. Now we have the rainbow one. This one wasn't as desired, but gem rate was really tough compared to other ones. Again, 1,400 out of the 2,600. Again, a much tougher gem rate than a lot of these other cards. As for the value of this is one that hasn't really rebounded at all. This is a lot because of the fact that people nowadays are not super big on the rainbows. I think there's really only a couple of rainbow cards that aren't, like the tag team ones mainly are going up because of the fact that people just want the tag team cards. But single Pokemon or trainers is only a couple that really have rebounded. This card out the gate, $150 to $200 almost immediately. And then it went up to $450. This one was a really high one, $400. Did have some 325s. Then it just kept going down, down, down until you had the really low sale in 2023. But overall, this is about a $50 card. And it's pretty much stayed that way. Yes, there was the recent sale of 72 early in October. This card has stayed $50. And even when you look at like these sales, these are not super common sales. These are a couple sales a month, sometimes not even having a sale in a month. So this card's liquidity hasn't really been great. Again, this was a top chase card. When you think of these trainers, right, we've seen this with a lot of them have gone down, the Iona, the Miriam. When those sets first came out, again, there's a lot of people who talk a lot about Pokemon right now that weren't even around for Paldea or Scarlet and Violet. When those sets were $80 to $90 for a booster box, the Miriam and the Iona were the cards you wanted. And those cards have gone down. Because, again, this is the waifu craze and it's gone down. Very few of these trainers are really going to stick there. Again, we've seen multiple little booms to trainer cards, especially the quote-unquote waifu ones. Again, these was another one. Now I have one more trainer to show, and that's the Sonya from Rebel Clash. Rebel Clash, not the most memorable set. Again, this one was a 66, or this one is actually a little over 50, so like a 55% gem rate. So again, a lesser one. These trainers were a bit harder to gem. 1,100 compared to the almost 2,000 total that were graded. As for the value of this one, again, gone down, never really recovered. This one, after the initial booms in early 2021, where this car was hitting almost $400, it kind of stood pat at about $150 to $200, and that's kind of where it was. Then it went down to like $80. Had a little bit of resurgence to about $140, $100 in September and August 2023. Went down some more to as low as like $40, and is now about $70. Again, even compared to 2022, it's still down like $10, but it is, again, down like 50% from what it was, not at its peak, but at its peak consistent value in 2021. So again, you are seeing another example of a card that has gone down, and while it hasn't necessarily tanked in the past 2 years, when it came out, it did. You got to remember something. TCG Player only shows the past year. It does not show you the past 5 years, and I've seen other people comment, and I agree with it. A lot of people would feel a lot different buying a card for $100 now if they knew that card for multiple years was like $5. That's something that's important to note, is that TCG Player is only the last year. It is important to look back at the overall few years, because that shows what it was when we weren't in a boom. Again, when we were going down in price, you were seeing these cards going down in value, though some of them weren't, and we're going to start by looking at the alt arts now. Again, I know a lot of people want to talk about the alt arts, the alt sword shield. Number one, these ones are overall better than illustration rares. The simple reason is because there's less of them. The reason that makes them better in a lot of ways is because the illustration rares, a lot of them still are relatively, like, not even relative, they are just printed to like the same, but there's, so many of them for these. Like alt arts, there were some sets that like regular V alt arts, like I know Evolving Skies is like a full case of ETBs, like it was like 180 packs. So overall, they're pretty much better than illustration rares purely because of the amount of them, both the amount of overall cards and the amount printed. So that's one thing that makes these better than illustration rares in that sense. Now, SARs are a bit different, but not fully, like I said before. Like, the Evolving Skies VMAXs are, like, really rare. I think they're almost, like, 2,000 packs rare. So, this one. Battle Styles. First alt arts in the Sword Shield era. The Full Art the Tyranitar V. This is a card that has, again, a positive gem rate. It's about a 60% gem rate, almost 6,000. It is a little over 11,000, so it's not like really that close to 60, about 55% gem rate. As for the 10, very interesting graph here. This came out during that later end of the boom, like true boom of like that early 2021. But when it did come out, it was about $450. Remember, all the cards we're talking about from here on to the end are pretty much after the real boom had happened and is part of that like crash that we saw and that correction period. So they're much more just true value, because this was in an era, especially the later cards we're going to talk about from like Silver Tempest and Astral Radiance, were pretty much when it was like not a boom, not a crash, it was just the value. And so those are real true values. This card was initially $450, was about $200, right? Back in December 2022, it was about $200, stayed roughly that way, and it actually went down a bit. In 2023, it actually went down to about $160. You had a lot of 180 sales. Then it had this one massive sale for $400, about like a week and a half later. Then it went down again, but it stayed a little bit higher than it was. It was about $240, $250-ish. Went down a bit, and then again, it just spiked randomly to about $500. Then it went down to $400, and then it's been spiking very recently to our recent deal of $770. Now, these few sales are extreme. These could potentially be market manipulation. These could potentially be things. These are not normal ones unless we are seeing a Sword and Shield boom, which, again, looking at these graphs, I wouldn't be super shocked that that's what we're kind of happening, is that the trend is now buy all the Sword and Shield cards you can. With that being said, this card has historically gone, stay the same, go down, have a price spike, go down, keep going down, but then spike, and it always does it to where it is a bit more than it used to be. Remember, this is a card that a lot of people in the past few months are trying to like super hype up as like a card that's always been mega desired. PSA 10s have been significantly less than a lot of these SIRs and IRs. Because I think a big thing with these cards, especially spiking very recently, is people are realizing like, hey, these cards really are just as, if not more desirable than the Scarlet and Violet era cards. Yet their PSA 10s are worth like a fifth of like the Charizard or the Van Gogh Pikachu. So that's the Tyranitar. Now the Glaceon. This is one of the two cards from Evolving Skies I'm going to be looking at. I wanted to look at the big boy itself and then another one. Glaceon. or Glaceon. Again, plus 50% gem rate, very close to 50%. In fact, this one actually is 50%. It's technically a bit better, like 50.5, whatever, but it's basically a 50% gem rate card. 5,410, again, compare these to a lot of the big chase cards for Scarlet and Violet. As to the value of this one, again, very similar graph, except without the super spike recently. Only a couple ones. Once you had the initial sales, this was hovering about a $150 to $170 card. Then it actually started going down. Again, 2023 went down to about 100, all the way down to 60 in 2024. And it was a sub $100 card for a while. Then it started rising in early 2024, rose to about 200. Of course, we ended up having Prismatic come out later on, which we've, again, makes sense why we're having this happen in this early 2025 and late 2024, where it ends up going back up to about a $200 card, up to almost 300. Starts going down a bit, back to 200, but then it starts spiking to being about 250. This card's real value is about 250 right now, which again is actually the highest it's been since its, initial first few sales. So in terms of pure true value, it is currently only technically a bit lower than the early January, February of 2025. Still higher, but again, this card was going down, did have a resurgence, went down a little bit, went up, went down, and is going up again. These aren't just straight graphs that just keep going up, because that's what I'm trying to get a lot of people to understand. These ultra modern cards having graphs that just, for all intents and purposes, just keep going up, or have like this kind of dip here, and they call this a dip. Like a lot of these Scarlet and Violet era cards just pretty much have continuously gone up against really all rhyme or reason. And these Sword and Shield era cards kind of show that, like, hey, not, something's a bit fishier. Now, the Moonbreon, great card. I think out of all the Super Mega Chase cards, this is one of the few of them that, not one of the few, but one of the kind of few that really do deserve to be loved. This was a great artwork. Now, this is a relatively easy gem rate. I mean, this is a really easy one. You got almost 1,900 for less than 2,700. This is over 2/3 gem rate. Really easy card to get in a PSA 10. As for the value, this card pretty much just always went up. Yes, okay, so initially, it's about like a $700 to $500 card. It went down a little bit. Obviously, it went down again. The Moonbreon went down in value, and it's gone down numerous times. Again, look at this. This was a $3,000 card, and it tanked all the way to $2,000, but then it's gone back up. Again, there will be booms, and there will be, things going down in cards, but if it's a true big chase card, it's going to usually have a similar graph to this. Then it started going back up to 1,000, started going a little bit down to about 700, 800. Then it went up to 1,500 to 1,700. Then it went down to about 1,200. Then it kept going up, had a massive spike because of a couple big sales, went down in value, went up. And then you've had a few recent sales of 4,000. Now, 4,000 right now is overpriced. At the moment, that is like, I would highly recommend against not paying $4,000 for this card right now. Again, remember, this isn't the super toughest PSA 10. It's super desirable, but right now, the true value of this card should be about 3,000, maybe 3,200. You're paying $4,000 for this card. Man, there's a lot you can buy for $4,000 that's better than this one. Not a ton, but there's some. Because again, this card had a very unrealistic spike in early 2025. Again, Prismatic boom, really, the Prismatic evolution set really affected a lot of these evolutions. Went down, so that's the Moonbreon. Now the Full Armor Champ. This is a great one. This was and still is the chase card of Astral Radiance. Again, a later later Sword and Shield era set. Again, a positive 50% gem rate or over 50% gem rate card. 4,710 over 8,500 total. As to the graph, look at this one. As soon as it came out, it just went downhill. Now, it wasn't like a steep decline, but this card was about $300 and just continuously went down to where in March of 2024 and even a bit earlier, it was down to 150. It took a legit 50% drop in less than 2 years. Then it had a bit of a resurgence up to, again, about $300 in early June. Started going down again to about 200. Then it had this other big spike again early January. A lot of cards went up in early January with Prismatic and Surging Sparks hype. Went down some more to about 300, and now is true value is probably about 350. Yes, again, recent sales of 400. This card really should be worth about 350 right now. Again, another one of these cards that, even after all this time, it's almost worth exactly what it was when it came out. I mean, again, when it first came out, you were having sales, again, 320, almost 300, 295. Basically, it was a $300 card for the first couple of months it came out. And now it is just now getting above 300. So this was without it being in a true boom. It takes years for these things to go up normally. Normally, it ends up being where the card, the more, during a print cycle, more of them are coming out, more of them are being printed, more of them are being graded. Then you wait for the printing cycle to stop, but you're still having more and more getting graded, so the pop count is continuing to go up. Then eventually, it's been a couple of years, the print count is done, there's not as many being graded. There still are being graded, but not as many. And then you start seeing things rising. Not that you just keep spiking cards that are still getting graded. Again, 151, you could still find it in stores in the past couple of months. Paldean Fates is like getting another box upcoming. Again, these sets are not fully out of print yet. And last but not least, the Lugia from Silver Tempest. This is a set that got a lot of printing. This set was out there for a long time. Over 20,000 graded in 10. Again, matching a lot of these big Scarlet and Violet era chase cards. Again, solid gem rate, over 50%. As for the value of this card, it just kept going down. This was $700 at first. It just kept tanking. This is like a borderline tank to some people. Went down to 300. Yes, it went down a bit more, but really this went down to about 300 because it started rebounding. Yes, it went down to 250. Being honest, basically was about $300. Then had a little spike to 500 in May of 2024. Went down again to about 300. Then it started going up again to 700. Then it went down to 600. Then it spiked up to being about $1,000 now. Massive spike in the very recent times. But again, when you look at this card compared to a lot of Scarlet and Violet era cards, $1,000 really doesn't look super bad. But again, this is a card that took years to get to this point. This card especially shows just how overvalued a lot of these Scarlet and Violet era cards are. Because this card was so desired when it came out. Lugia is one of the most popular legendaries of all time. This is a super desired card. When you think of chase cards and legendaries, there's like a couple Mewtwo's you think of, obviously like Mewtwo. You think of Lugia. You think of the Crystal Lugia. You think of the Lugia EX from the EX era. You think of this Altart. You think of Lugia when you think of chase cards. It's just that simple. When you think of legendary and chase cards, you think of Lugia. And this card, just now hitting 1,000 and it taking us being in a true boom in a time where this specific era of cards are booming, that is insane that it just now hit 1,000. Whereas you have so many Scarlet and Violet era cards that are $1,000 in PSA 10s that some of them are even more printed than this Lugia was. It's insane. But overall, that's the list of these cards, or that's all 15 of these cards. So what can be learned from this? What can be learned from this is what we are living in right now is not normal. These Scarlet and Violet era cards being worth what they are in 10s and staying that is not truly normal, nor is it really sustainable. What will happen is people will leave the hobby. Again, we're in a correction period. Maybe this becomes a crash. I personally don't think so. We are hitting the 30th anniversary. But what could easily happen is we get to the point where we technically do see a crash, but the crash is just Scarlet and Violet era stuff, and then Mega Evolution stuff just goes even higher. I really wouldn't be super shocked at that if all the money bros just take their money out of Scarlet and Violet and put it into Mega Evolution. Wouldn't be shocked, because again, as talked about in my recent TCG history video, which you can click the top right of this to go to that one, I talked about the fact that we've only had technically two eras where we've had multiple eras within one era. Gen 2, you had the Neo sets, you had like the specialty legendary collection, but you basically had the Neo sets and then the E-Reader sets. And then Gen 4, you had Diamond and Pearl, you had Platinum, and you had Heart Gold, Soul Silver. This is the first time we've seen it since then, where it's at least two distinct eras, not just these sets were before Altarts, these were after. No, two legit eras. Wouldn't be shocked if that happens. Also, it shows that a lot of these cards are overvalued. They just are. Because again, these were cards that were just as, if not more, desirable than the cards we have now. But it's to the point now where these cards, a lot of them still have not reached the numbers that we've seen the current cards at. And it's just crazy. Because again, the Scarlet Violet Ultramodern era, like I'm trying to help people. You need to understand. If you have 10 considered chase cards from Scarlet Violet in a PSA 10, in theory, 2 or 3 of them are going to keep going up. 2 or 3 more are probably going to go down, but not like tank. They're just going to go down, then eventually go back up. And then the rest are going to just outright tank. That's what's probably going to end up happening. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of these cards that aren't as desirable as people might like you to think they are. Again, the Shinji Kanja cards, like the Seismitoad. Fun fact, artist cards have never sustained true value. When you think of true artist cards, like this has happened before with like certain trainers and even other Pokemon, if I'm not mistaken. That way I know a little bit less than the other booms, but I know the artwork booms or artist booms have happened before and they've never lasted. They really are a fad. It's not anything against any of the artists. It's just a fad, and the Seismitoad is a great example. At the end of the day, Seismitoad is not a popular enough Pokemon to justify the card being worth what it was. Again, the USG Men card or the UG Men cards, to the average person, they go against, like when people say, oh, we're in the era of the best artwork and you show those cards, those are like, they are fun and great artworks, but when you're using that as an argument of great artwork, they, do the opposite. like the Booger Mew recent one that came out in like Black Bolt or White Flare. Like, that's a card that's not going to hold value. A lot of those UG Men cards are not going to hold the value that people think they are. There's a lot of other cards like that. Now, the super big chase cards, again, they're not guaranteed to keep going up. Again, the Shoot Rainbow was a mega chase card. People loved that thing, and it went down. So it's not like we're guaranteed to see cards like the Umbreon keep value, especially when cards are not really as well liked by actual fans. Again, when you think of Charizard from this era, if you include Mega Evolution, you've got 4 SIRs for Charizard. The weakest by far is the 151. It's not even Charizard, it's the short neck Charizard, to where it is really like one of the least desired cards, or just least pleasurable cards to look at for Charizard, really, of all time, because of the fact that it's not really Charizard. The Sunbreon, it's nowhere near as good as Moonbreon, and it's not even the best evolution in the set. There's other evolutions like the Vaporeon that just look better in that set. Now, while some cards I personally think are probably going to stand the test of time because they are popular Pokemon, like the Greninja, like the Paldean Fatezard, I think that a lot of them are going to go down, a lot of them are going to go up, and a lot of them are going to kind of go down and then go back up. But overall, that'll do it for this video. If you did make it this far, I will ask if you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Again, if you made it this far, I would assume you enjoyed this video. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments about your thoughts on these overall, the past boom and what happened to a lot of these cards. Again, I'm probably going to have more videos talking about Ultra Modern cards and PSA slabs and all that. Might do some videos on previous eras. In the Diamond and Pearl era, the more I look it up, the more it's like, man, that era was so... I'm not going to say undervalued because I don't really think it's undervalued. It's just so low valued, I guess is the best way to put it. Where it's low valued, so is it undervalued? I really don't know for sure, so I might do a deep dive in that. But again, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and have a great night.